Turn on your, let me see you guys. Turn on your videos. There you are. Don't be shy. Let me see you. We all know each other. All right. Yeah, that was the Beatles doing Tomorrow Never Knows with backwards instrumentation and all kinds of stuff. So I hope you enjoyed it. It kind of plays into the theme of our discussion today, which is we're moving away from the pre-Socratics and natural science, or rather natural philosophy, into the kind of social ethical philosophy of Socrates and whatnot. So how is everyone this morning? Are you doing all right? You doing all right? I've got a little bit of a warm up. It's not, I'm going to ask you to kind of, rather than put it into the chat box, just kind of talk to me a little bit about it. I've taken some excerpts from a poem by Robert Frost entitled After Apple Picking. And it speaks to the focus of our discussion today, which is really, how do we know what we know? How do we test that reality? So I'm going to switch my screen around and show you these little excerpts and kind of go over it with you. And I want to hear from you. So turn on your mics and let me know what you think. You should be able to see the little excerpts right now. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Somebody says, yep. Come on, guys, turn them on. Yes, okay, thank you for the thumbs up. Gotta let me know you're out there and you're alert. I know it's early. After apple picking, even the title of the poem might suggest a lot of things, especially in Western culture. When we think of the apple, when we think of an apple tree, often we think of like a Garden of Eden, which leads to the expulsion, our own mortality, all these kinds of things. So what happens after apple picking, after this life? But more importantly, we talk these days about things like a woke society. We talk about things about concepts like justice. And these are the kinds of things that Plato, Socrates and through Plato, will be discussing as well. So I want to talk about what it means to be woke. I want to talk about what it means to truly see and understand reality. But let's begin with this little excerpt. I'll read it through, I'll explain to you what's going on, and then I want to hear some of your views on this. So let me make sure I got it all. We're missing a little bit of this thing. There we go. I cannot shake the shimmer from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass I skimmed this morning from the water trough and held against a world of hoary grass. It melted and I let it fall and break, but I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. Okay, so in this poem, the situation is the speaker here, there's a water trough, we're outside, he's finished apple picking for the day. And it's cold, so on the top of the water is like ice. You've seen that. Southern California, you probably never have seen that. But anyway, sometimes ice forms, a little plate of glass, like ice forms on top of the water. He's looking at that and he picks up that ice glass pane, as he refers to it, and he looks through that glass, that ice, at the world. And of course, in that situation, the world looks a bit distorted to him. And because he's done with the day, done with his apple picking, he's tired and he's about to sleep. So he anticipates perhaps here, one can see what trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. And when he says that, I think we have to think about sleep in a different way, not just that physical sleeping, but another kind of waking sleep maybe. One can see what trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is going to take. And he then gives what's called the pathetic fallacy. He ascribes to non-human things, emotions, thoughts, those kinds of things. And he suggests that were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his. Now, a woodchuck, when it sleeps a long sleep, we talk about it as hibernation. The question is, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, like hibernation, kind of a natural thing, as I describe the feeling, he says, coming on, or just some human sleep. So we are seeing a distinction between this idea of the physical sleeping, the hibernation of the woodchuck in this case, and a different kind of sleep, a human sleep. And this is connected to the way he sees the world through that pane of ice glass, if you will. So let me take a look at it one more time. And then I just want you to kind of let me know what you think. I know that that's hard. And if you want to use the chat box, we can do that as well. And I'll make sure that it's on. Just a second here. Okay. So I cannot shake the shimmer from my sight. So we're already getting what here? This idea of something he has seen, a shimmering thing. And when things are shimmering, are they clear? These are open-ended questions, guys. When things are shimmering in your eyes and you can't shake off that shimmer, can you see things clearly?
No.
Thank you. And he can't shake off the shimmer from my sight, but I think that this idea of shimmer and sight also kind of suggests a kind of discomfort or a lack of certainty in some way. I can't get rid of this feeling. I got from looking through a pane of glass. That's that ice sheet on top of the water trough. I skimmed this morning from the water trough. And then he held it up against a world of hoary grass. So he's looking through that. Now, there's a wonderful line from St. Paul that says, we look at the world as if through a glass darkly. Meaning, do we see it as real or is it an illusion? Can we see it clearly? So I think that the poet is suggesting here that sometimes we look at the world as if we're looking through that pane of glass, distorted, opaque, not clear. And that vision, if you will, melted like ice, like in our own sleep, if you will. So let me ask you right now, how many of you have ever been dreaming but thought you were awake?
Yeah.
Just good. Yeah, vocalize, guys. Get comfortable, please. Yes. How many of you have ever been dreaming and then realized that you were in a dream?
Yeah.
Realize that realization of the first dream, you're actually in a different dream. The question becomes, when we can't tell when we're dreaming or not in sleep, how do we know we're not dreaming right now? How do we know that this is not just a dream, or in this case, maybe a nightmare? The big question is, how do we know? And as we move into Socrates and Plato, that's the central thing. Can we trust our physical vision, guys? Is seeing believing? Is seeing knowing? Anybody?
No, I don't think so.
So I got to know who's talking. Who is that?
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn, what do you mean by I don't think so?
Because I feel like we see what we want to see, like, you know, we see
It's
what
kind
we
of
want
relative
to
to our
see.
perception, yes.
Yeah.
And so is it a truth or is it just
It's
truth?
our truth, but not the truth. Maybe truth to myself because that's what I see, that's what I want to see, but it doesn't mean that's the truth for everyone else.
Yes, but we must take into account that if that's the case, then maybe what we're seeing isn't true. It may even say there is no truth. That's all truth is subjective to the viewer or the person who's making that point. Absolutely. So, but I was upon my way to sleep before the ice, the vision melted away, and I could take what form what form my dreaming was about to take. What do you think? What do he means by that? If the illusions fall away, if we acknowledge that perhaps the way we're looking at the world is not clear, is not true, not touching on reality, we can have visual hallucinations, thinking we're seeing things that we're not seeing, auditory hallucinations. Our five senses could play us false, so we can't rely on those. And if the illusions that we hold, the certainties that we hold, based upon our sensual impressions of the world, is not necessarily truth. That melts away. What new vision do we have? What new dream? What new form? It's a big philosophical question. If the illusions fall away, do we then come to an understanding of reality? What is real? And he moves on. One can see what trouble, this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is going to take. What is the reality here? What is the trouble when we wake to sleep or sleep to wake? Which is the truer reality? Since Jocelyn, you had mentioned that reality to some degree is relative to the person who perceives it, then maybe our perceptions are the truth and all we see is an illusion. And that's troubling, because are we in a waking dream? Or are we in a dreaming wake? Are we really woke? And to get back to that point about woke society, when we talk about that, what does that mean today? You've all heard, I'm sure, it's almost become a politicized view that people are asleep to injustice, asleep to racism, asleep to misogyny, all these kinds of things. But those who are woke, what does that mean? Have you heard that expression before?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, all the time. Okay. So what does it mean, or what does it mean to you?
Like being aware.
I think to be knowledgeable, to know.
Wait, let's go slowly here, because I love this. Katie, you said to be aware.
Be aware and conscious of like what's going on, and like, yeah, and being knowledgeable, like Jocelyn said.
And Jocelyn, to be knowledgeable, the two. Once to be aware is to be knowledgeable, perhaps.
But I also think
aware
it's
and
particular
knowledgeable.
knowledge.
And I'm sorry, Era? All right.
Well, I was going to say that it's particular knowledge. It's just not like knowledge as in like your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. This is like humanitarian knowledge, knowing what other people are going through, what their generations have gone through, and consciously stepping through life by being aware and watching your words around certain situations.
Absolutely.
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
I'm sorry?
Exactly, she's right.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes. So, aware of what?
Pretty much
Knowledgeable
everything
about
around
what?
you.
I'm sorry?
Pretty much everything around you.
Well, that's, you know, an era where you were saying something more particular. When we talk about woke society, I think that people are referring to the idea of wake up to the fact that there has been a lot of social injustice, systemic racism, systemic violence. Why do people need to be awakened to this fact? What does that mean? Were they asleep to it before?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we all live in our personal cocoons of life, you know, like our families, our jobs, our work, and it just seems to kind of overwhelm us.
Mm-hmm.
When you're woke, you're not just aware of what you're living through, you're actually aware of what everyone else is living through. You're aware that we are all in a pandemic, you know, you're not just aware of your pandemic, you're aware of everyone's pandemic, you know, you're aware of everyone's plight or everyone's bad days as much as you're aware of your own bad days. And it's just like consciously stepping through life in awareness and in giving people space to live through their own life, you know?
So that awareness is basically the understanding of the other.
Right.
Yourself. Wow.
Right.
Good stuff. And some, and the things that the other may be going through, not just yourself.
Right.
Wow. So that's.
And taking that into account when dealing with said people.
Right.
You know, like it's like being woke about what's happening in Armenia is to walk consciously through my day, aware of when I see flags,
Sure.
that those people are going through something. They're not just waving their flag because they have pride. They're waving it because they're trying to let us all know something.
Right. So we get out of it in a sense of our own, I think somebody said cocoon, or our own bubble. We become aware, awakened to sometimes the tragedies and the horrors, and other times maybe the joy and bliss of others. Yeah. Do you, you know, when I don't like anybody putting down America who isn't an American. I just, you know, I can put it down. We can, or criticize it, whatever it is. But when I travel through Europe, often they say about Americans, myself included, that we're asleep. We're all asleep over here. As if, you know, like what Marx had said about, you know, religion is the opiate of the masses. Television, consumership, all of us keeps us in this bubble, keeps us asleep.
Distracted.
I'm sorry, Philip?
Oh, I said distracted, but asleep, I guess.
Distracted, you know, shimmering lights in our eyes, you know, to make us unaware and perhaps even put us to sleep. And so rather than looking at us, as I just suggested, unfortunately, as a nation or as a group or anyway, what about as an individual? Are we walking through life asleep? And is that what the poem is suggesting in the difference between a hibernation, a kind of natural sleep, if you will, or just some human sleep, a kind of choosing, if you will, on some maybe subconscious level, to be asleep to the other, to be unaware? I'm always baffled by this idea of a woke society. I mean, why wouldn't they already know? But they don't. And do we, in a sense, hibernate? Do we close our eyes, unwilling to look at a reality because maybe it's too brutal? Maybe the reality is, you know, we're born, you go on a couple of diets and you die. And that's too unbearable to imagine. So I wanted to kind of link those two things. What do you think? Are you awoke? Are you awakened?
Yeah, I believe so.
I would like to think
To
so.
this point.
Yeah.
I'm hearing words like I'd like to think so, and I'm hearing phrases like I believe so. I want to suggest that to believe is not to know. When you know,
Yes.
it means you cease to believe because you know.
I mean,
So,
I
I
feel
don't
like
know I'm saying that, excuse me?
Well, I was just gonna say that, you know, I feel like if people kind of feel that they're awoke, maybe it's more of an awakening. Like we are all in the process of awakening.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess if some of us do feel woke, like I do feel woke, but I know that there's so much more information I need to know. So
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm fully woke, but I can say that I'm awakening to the real world.
That's a fantastic way of looking at it. We are in a process of awakening continually. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a matter of information necessarily. I think it's a matter of that inward journey of touching in and asking yourself, what is it that I know? What is it that I can say is real, is true? How do I, you know, deal with the other and be awoke to that situation? I think many of us choose to be blind to, let's say, some of our flaws, some of our motivations. Some of us may not want to look at that other side of ourselves. And sometimes that inner journey, that exploration, that kind of brutal honesty we were talking about last session, is what's necessary to kind of be in that process you talked about of awakening. Ooh, I love that term, an awakening. Okay, so anybody else want to share something about this poem? Is it significant to you? Does it make you want to wake up? I know it's early in the morning, so everybody wake up. All right, I'm going to switch back out for a second. Hi again, everyone. And I think we want to start to move in to these new set of philosophers. We've been looking at, and does anybody want to share, I'm sure that last assignment on the pre-Socratic philosophers was difficult and challenging. You guys want to share a little bit of your feelings about that? I say that because some of you may be into physics, some of you may not. Some of you probably had to go and kind of acquaint yourself with contemporary physics, you know, black holes and space and time and gravity, but not too much. I didn't expect you to be experts on that. But in order to link what the assignment's asking you to do, which is look at these philosophers, observing just with the bald eye, if you will, without much instrumentation, measuring and calculating. And so much of what they say in terms of our contemporary understanding of physics, you know, is somewhat true. This notion of luciferase and particles of atoms colliding against each other has been borne out. Of course, it was a rudimentary view, but I'm always amazed by the ability of the human being to be able to observe and measure even without these instruments and come to certain hypotheses and even to some conclusions. when I think about Parmenides and this idea of nothing ever really changes, everything is the same, immutable, unchanging, and all things are connected in that physical sense, or the sense of natural philosophy, that bleeds into so many religions that we study. It has such bearing on something that's so necessary now. This idea that you guys talk about, the unification of the human being, finding commonality, being connected. It works in this idea of oneness, not only with humanity, but with oneself, and being complete in that way. And the notion by Heraclitus of, a constant flux, everything is constantly changing. We see that in our microcosmic lives. We see that in the macrocosmic universe. All of these things still have a lot of significance. And I look at it beyond just physics, because they're philosophers. So what can we learn from this idea of the immutable one? That even though the desk seems to have changed, disintegrated into sawdust, it's still all there. Even though you seem to change, disintegrate into ash, the energy that makes you up is still a part of the world stuff, of the universal stuff. Is that consoling for some of you? Is that terrifying? You never came, you never went. There's no birth, there's no death. There's just a continuum. Sometimes it's consolatory. So anybody want to share anything about the last assignment? You can even gripe if you want. Man, that was too difficult, whatever you want to say. Or I didn't understand it. Philip, you look like you want to say something.
No, I swear I don't want to say anything.
Please, now's the time, because I'm planning on assessing and I want to be generous. But if there's anybody that's feeling like, wow, I didn't get it, or you want to share an insight that you gained. All right, we're good? Let's move on. How many of you have ever heard of Socrates?
Me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Okay. And what, can you tell me anything about him? Anything that you know about him? You just heard the name? Well, he was this guy, and he would walk around Athens. He's from Athens, and barefoot. Didn't like to bathe. Didn't really, make money. He's out there basically philosophizing. He was a part of a school known as the Academy. The Academy at Athens. And Socrates was actually the guy who taught Plato. Where we get from Socrates is through his pupil, through his student, Plato, who wrote down in dialogues what Socrates was teaching. By dialogues, I mean that Socrates would be speaking to a student. The student would have particular preconceived notions of things through a form of questioning, the same thing that, how do we know what you know? Through a form of questioning the student who makes certain assumptions about justice, peace, hope, love, whatever it may be. Socrates will then demonstrate to those individuals that they really don't understand what they're talking about in a form of bullying. So to some degree. So these dialogues were written down by Plato, and that's how we get Socrates. Now, at the Academy, there were many teachers, and many of them were called sophists. Think of the word philosophy. We talked about that below. Philo, love, Sophy, knowledge and wisdom. So that sophists were these individuals who were trying to get answers to, what do we know? How do we know what we know? All of these kinds of questions. Sometimes that kind of devolved into splitting hairs, and no conclusions were drawn. All that really came up was, we know that we don't know. What we can't know, we don't know. And these philosophers at the Academy were often teaching students who were the children of very wealthy Athenians. And some of this kind of teaching seemed to go against the conservative values, beliefs, and customs of ancient Athens. And no one seemed to appear more dangerous in this way than Socrates. Socrates made the statement once that he is the wisest of all people because he's the only one who admits that he doesn't know anything. And I think his purpose was to go in a sense, to demonstrate that people often don't know what they're talking about in terms of some of these abstract concepts that we ourselves are constantly using. When we talk about justice, what does that mean? When we talk about hope, peace, love, when we talk about good, evil, these are abstract concepts. What do they mean? So when people in ancient Athens were talking about just societies or democracy, Socrates was questioning, trying to get to a closer and closer truth about what these things mean. And all of those discussions, not all of them, were written down by Plato in the form of like a drama, like a dialogue, where Socrates is talking to Glaucon, one of his pupils. And so we have Socrates speaking and then Glaucon responding and these kinds of things. And so Socrates was investigating social conduct, ethical conduct, these questions that concern the here and now. He wasn't focusing on, like Parmenides, Heraclitus, Leucippus, Democritus, on the physics of the cosmos, of the universe. He was talking about human beings in social structures and the philosophy that focuses on that. So that was a huge shift, a move in philosophy. Again, as part of the humanism that we've been talking about, humanism, the here and now, the human beings' capabilities to understand phenomena, each other, by applying reason. So Socrates wrote all this kind of stuff down. It was getting kind of dangerous because in forcing people to think for themselves and reconsider a lot of things, questioning the past, something that's happening really right now, debunking the old myths of America, the old heroes, that becomes dangerous to traditionalists and conservatives. People want to conserve a culture. And so Socrates was actually accused of a crime. He was accused of leading the youth astray, of teaching immorality to the youth, of denying the gods, those, Zeus and all of them. So for corrupting the youth and denying the gods and authority to some degree, Socrates was charged and put on trial. The trial was also written down as one of the dialogues by Plato. And you should know this, no one wanted Socrates to die. Not even the people who brought the charges to him. And the penalty, if he was found guilty, was indeed death. Nobody wanted him to die. But Socrates refused to recant. Even with the threat of death, they had asked him, well, aren't you afraid of death? And he said in that very Socratic way, why should I be afraid of something I know not of? I don't know what death is, so why should I be afraid of it? Bravery, he said, is knowing what to fear. We mentioned that before. What to fear? Well, trial's over, he's found guilty, he's put into the prison, and he's supposed to drink hemlock. This is a drug, basically, that will kill him. Plato was there, everybody was there. Many of these students who had money had opened up the door so he could escape, bribed everybody so he could escape. Everybody wanted him to escape. Socrates said, no, I'm going to abide by the rules of this society if you find me guilty. In other words, he drank the hemlock and died, upholding his own integrity, his own principles. It is really an individual who died for his beliefs. And so there's a lot of that, the kind of the back story, if you will, about Socrates. But we're going to move into what Socrates was talking about and through Plato. So I want to get to that right now. Now, many of you use terms a lot, like the ones we'd mentioned, justice, peace, hope. What do they mean? What is something just? We're hearing today with all of this, the things that we're seeing, innocents murdered in the streets. We're asking for justice for the family of George Floyd and so many others. What does that mean? Where do we get justice? Let's say an individual has been murdered. Is justice then bringing the individual who did the murder to trial, life imprisonment, execution, whatever it may be? Is that justice? Is that
That's what we've been taught.
It's what we've been taught, but this is where I'm going to get Socratic with you. Okay, let's just start with first principles. What we've been taught may not be true. And even those who taught us, did they know what justice was? So I'm going to continue this, but I'm going to switch the screen out right now to this. You should be seeing a PowerPoint. You're seeing,
Yes.
I think I may have shown this to you before, an image here. This is a 16th century fresco by the Renaissance artist Raphael. It's the School of Athens, that academy I talked about. And in this depiction that we're looking at right now, we see here in the middle, this is supposed to be Plato, only Raphael put the face of his contemporary there, that is Leonardo da Vinci. And this is supposed to be Aristotle. And we're going to learn about Aristotle too and their difference, because Plato did teach Aristotle, but they will separate. And Plato here is pointing up to the sky, the realm of the ideas, of the abstract. And Aristotle's here pointing to the earth, the area of the practical, of the concrete, because that in a sense shows the difference between Plato and Aristotle. The realm of the ideas, the realm of practice, the realm of theory, practice, thinker, doer. You'll note that on all of these figures who are ancient Greek philosophers with some contemporary Italians, philosophers of his time, are all the thinkers. So we have various individuals here. Here is Heraclitus, for example, the philosopher you've already studied. He's got the face of Michelangelo. Over here, down in here, on the side of the doers, the thinkers, Plato, ideas, doers, Aristotle, practitioners. We have Ptolemy, and he's holding up his, let me see if I can get this a little bit better for you. Give me a second while I have to get through the slideshow very quick. There we go. So we have Aristotle pointing the heavens, Plato pointing the heavens, Aristotle pointing the earth. Over here we have, Ptolemy, who's holding the geocentric theory of the universe, again, that practitioner. So we're moving into this individual, Plato, and his ideas. So let me get right out of that. And these are busts, sculptures of the philosophers we're going to be discussing right now. So notice that Socrates, it was suggested that Socrates was not a very attractive or handsome individual, kind of looked piggish, didn't really, not very good hygiene, those kinds of things. He was definitely a real person, and he was mocked and ridiculed in many of the dramas, some of which you will, the comedies, I mean, that you will look at when we get to Greek drama, tragedy, and comedy. So, you know, he's one of these individuals who is kind of well known, and as today we do political satire on people, whether it's SNL or Colbert, or whatever it may be, Socrates was often the butt of many, many jokes. But his pupil was Plato. Plato isn't his actual name. Plato loosely translates to like big forehead. Apparently it's either a reference to his ability to think, or it's the physicality of the large forehead. And here we have Aristotle. So let's go to Socrates through Plato and what he's all about. Here's the first thing I want to start to talk about. He was a student of Socrates. Socrates has a very famous maxim, and that is to know thyself. Remember what I said earlier. He said, the wisest individual is the individual who recognizes he knows nothing. And that leads to embracing a kind of ignorance in this sense. You then explore to find out and learn things, as opposed to what I said before, kind of embracing knowledge and saying, I'm certain I don't need to look anymore. And that first understanding of all things is to know oneself. Begin by suggesting you don't know yourself. And what does it mean to know thyself? It means that inner journey. I've often said, and I don't know how true this is, that given a particular situation, all human beings will react in a similar, will feel a similar thing. If I place any one of you in an embarrassing situation, you will feel embarrassed, but all of you may react to that embarrassment differently. Some of you may play it off and act not embarrassed. Others will get really shy or blush, whatever it is. The point is that everybody will feel the same, but will react differently. Why do I believe that? Because I think that if I look inside and know myself and put myself in those shoes, if I were in that situation, how would I feel? This. And therefore, I can begin to understand the other, the thing that we were talking about prior, by understanding myself first. Can we understand someone else if we don't understand ourselves?
No.
I don't think so. I think it's like that saying where you can't love someone until you love yourself, something like that.
Well, I think that it applies absolutely. One has to understand what love is in order to be able to give it, in order to understand when one receives it. In many relationships, and I'm not doing any marriage counseling here, okay? But in many relationships, it's a matter of the other person not understanding how you demonstrate love. And I don't want to get too personal about it, but I understand love often in words. And to tell you the truth, because I come from abject poverty, food for me is love. If somebody makes me food, they're showing me love. I understand love sometimes in words and actions. My wife might understand just love in terms of things, in terms of actions. If I get her this, or I'm thinking about her, those kinds of things. And if we don't understand how the other understands love, or what justice is, or any concept, because we don't understand it in ourselves, we're going to have some problems. So yeah, I think that's a long way to say, yes, I think so too. So yeah, I don't think that you can understand, you can put yourself in somebody else's skin unless you understand yourself. And I think that if you apply that not only to individuals, but also to demographics, to nations, to people, different peoples, we start to understand, wow, there's much more in common than there is different. And we cease to fear so much. Okay. Now, the focus of all of this philosophy, of the Socratic philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, is kind of the same thing that we're trying to figure out. How to live the good life. Now, what the Greeks mean by good life is not what the Christian philosophers mean, a moral life, relationship to God. The good life means happiness. How do we achieve a kind of happiness? And what that really means is, how do we deal with this world? How do we deal with death? How do we deal with the other? How do we deal with struggle? How do we deal with all of this so that we find a kind of peace? Now, how many of us are interested in finding a kind of peace, whatever that means? Peace of mind.
Yes.
I think all of us.
What are we working so hard for? What is all of our existence all about, if not to try and find happiness? You know, sometimes people, I think, get confused about the end goal. So some people find, making money, is the thing. But money is a means toward an end. Yeah. Money is a means in order to try to arrive maybe at the end goal, which is happiness. Now, money can't buy happiness. It might buy off unhappiness. It's hard to be happy if you're hungry and you can't afford to eat, certainly about that. But sometimes we get confused about the process that leads to the end goal. And that end goal is happiness, whatever it may mean to you. It isn't these means by which we arrive at it. And so we have to come to an understanding of, okay, what is happiness? How do we arrive at it? How do we live the good life? Now, there are many systems out there that provide kind of direction, guidance, rules, commandments, amendments, name it, that give people direction. And some individuals who feel lost will latch onto these things because it helps them, it makes them happy. A belief system with God and thou shalt and thou shalt nots. A philosophical system, whatever it may be, that can help direct them. And I think that's the attraction of latching on, if you will, to a system of beliefs. It gives a kind of comfort and certainty, but it may not be true. So how do you live the good life? Well, let's look at good to begin with, says Socrates. And in this in this work here, this dialogue, the Meno, it's named after the student he's talking to, a guy named Meno. And what Socrates is trying to come to understand, or get Meno to understand, is what is virtue? Goodness. What does it mean to be good? And I want to hear it from you. What is goodness? Now remember, you're going to tell me you've been told what is good. You've learned, you've been taught. Goodness has been etched on stone tablets. And therefore, thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt honor thy mother and father. But what is it good? What is goodness? How many of you think of yourselves as good people?
Yeah, I do.
How come?
I would say that I'm good because I'm considerate, or I guess I'm in my awakening. So therefore, I do live my life at my own accord, but I'm also very consciously aware of everyone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we have those old ideas of like, thou shalt not kill, but like at the same time, sometimes we're put in situations where there is no other choice. And if you really kind of get stuck in the word of good, then I guess if you had to kill someone to survive, I mean, I really just believe that's just kind of life, other than I'm good or I'm bad. Now,
Yeah, I get that.
If I'm surviving, I can't put it in good or bad. But if I'm just doing it to do it, then I'm opposite of good.
So if I get it clear now, when it's a matter of life and death, survival, there's no morality, good, evil.
Right.
But when it's a matter of that it isn't life or death, actions may be then judged as good or evil.
Right.
But you know, okay, sounds good. I heard somebody else. You're good? You think you're good? Okay. So what is virtue? Let's kind of explore what Plato and Socrates through Plato is suggesting about virtue. I have some questions here. We look at somebody like Osama bin Laden. You all know him, right?
Yep.
We look at him as evil, do we not?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, 2,000 innocent people killed in the Twin Towers and many other things. Do you think that he saw himself as evil?
No.
No.
He probably saw himself as what?
Good.
Good.
Brave.
Right. So this idea of we view Osama bin Laden as evil, he viewed himself, and many of us follow him, as good. Which is the one? Because I have a feeling that the people we see as evil sometimes think of us as evil. So is it relative? Is it the reality of good and evil relative to the perceiver? One man's poison is another man's perfume?
Yeah, we all have a definition of good or bad. You know, we make it what we want to make it. That's why it's hard to say what's good and what's bad.
So you're mentioning like it's relative. So maybe there is no good or bad since everybody has their own views on it. Oh, good or bad. These are the problems of trying to understand what right action is, wrong action is, good, evil, these kinds of things. Here's what we get from Plato in terms of virtue. Virtue means goodness. Now remember, the word goodness comes from the notion of good, meaning God. So goodness is really that same kind of etymology, word origin, as the notion that we have of God. And just like we are in the process of awakening, perhaps we're on the process of moving towards goodness. But he says basically this. Goodness is knowledge of the good. Knowledge of the good. Now, every action you take, you may believe is going to lead to a good. Somebody's got their mic on and I can hear the background. If somebody could just shut that off. Every action that we take, we think is the right action. Nobody goes out and decides, I'm going to do evil. I mean, any rational person, right? They believe their actions are for a greater good. Sometimes it's a personal greater good. Sometimes it's a social one. I don't know. But their actions, because they didn't understand, they didn't know the outcome, they didn't have knowledge of the good, therefore they couldn't necessarily apply it. So, I mean, that's a little abstract, and maybe I'm not making it clear. But what it's going to come down to is lack of knowledge is in itself a kind of evil. Ignorance, which means lack of knowledge, stupidity is something else. Ignorance is a kind of evil. Any individual who has the opportunity, the access, the equity, if you will, to gain knowledge, that move is a good action. Any individual who has that opportunity and access and does not take it, chooses to remain ignorant, is enacting an evil. Now, I'm trying to get away from, let's say, the moral ideas that we often are taught in terms of good and evil. I'm looking at actions that lead to a greater benefit. So virtue, goodness, is knowledge of the good. If an individual, let's say Adolf Hitler, whom I think we universally view as an evil person, did he lack knowledge of the good? Is that what made him evil?
No.
No, I think he lacked compassion.
He lacked compassion. And for the most part, in the Shoah, in the Holocaust, in the murder of and genocide of the Jewish people in Germany and Poland and other places, many of them were the scientists, the nuclear physicists, who ultimately delivered the nuclear bomb to the Americans when they left Germany because of what Hitler was doing. In other words, if Hitler had just known that this act would have prevented him from winning a war, he wouldn't have done it. Now, I know that this is an extreme case that I'm talking about, but I'm just trying to get you to understand what he means by goodness. For the Greeks, there was the triple, the triumvirate: beauty, truth, and goodness. That is the essence of reality. What is true is beautiful. What is beautiful is true. What is true is goodness. And goodness is beautiful and true. Now, in this triumvirate of beauty, truth, and goodness, that's going to change when we get to the Romantic period. We won't, but when you do, in the 19th century. And Keats will say, forget the goodness part. Morality is too subjective. Truth is beauty, beauty is truth. Now let me say this. When someone dies, when someone is dead, that's a truth. Probably one of the most authentic moments, right?
Yep.
And so that case, because it's true, it's beautiful, and it's good. It's right. I'm not asking anybody to die. Do you understand? When I saw, going back to 9/11, let's say, the Twin Towers coming down, that was a horror. Horror. And even through the television set, I could sense it's a reality. At first, I didn't know, is this a movie? What's going on? But you know, when they fell, there was a terrible beauty. I know, I'm really going out on a ledge. There was a truth there that is beautiful. Not a goodness. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I feel
Child
like,
is born. Let's go to the
yeah.
opposite, because I'm giving nothing but tragedies.
Well, no, I mean, but I feel like if you're gonna go in that route, I mean, wouldn't the beauty that came from 9/11 would be the American people's
Unification.
awakening to what's really going on in the world. So maybe if you kind of look at this horrible tragedy, you could kind of see how it kind of just shook the nation, like, hey, like what we do in other countries is now coming here. And that maybe we all need to be more aware of the decisions of our government, or else things like this will continue to happen.
You're speaking about outcomes and the positivity that comes out of tragedy. I was really talking about the buildings falling down, the physical beauty of that. I know that sounds terrible. You know, and have you seen explosions of atom bombs, those mushroom clouds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a terrible beauty, because it's also true. I'm going to get off of that because it's getting a little it's a little bit more difficult. The point is, virtue, goodness, is knowledge of the good, knowing what is the good action. And we leave that relative to some degrees to you. So I'm going to move on for a second, but before I get into this, I'm going to talk about this allegory of the cave. Now you have, let me just switch two things out. Hold on a second. You're going to have two assignments on Plato. And one is this discussion assignment, Plato's Just Society. Please click in the link and all of that. Let me know if you're struggling or anything like that. And the other one is going to be on your midterm, this essay, Plato's Allegory of the Cave. Now, the Allegory of the Cave is actually written there. It's in there. You click in there and you'll read that. But I want to give you kind of a little help with that. So there's two on Plato. One is the Just Society and one's the Allegory of the Cave. I'm going to talk a little bit about this and then touch on this, okay? Yeah. All right, so here's the story. I want to be able to see you guys. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine that you were born and raised in a cave. And you are in this cave, and you're up against this wall, and you're chained to the wall. Your forehead is changed. Your arms are changed. You cannot move. You cannot look to the side. All you can do is stare directly in front of you. And directly in front of you is another wall in the cave. All right? Now, you're not the only one in the cave. There are other prisoners in the cave, all in the same posture and position, all shackled to a wall, all looking directly at the wall in front of them. Now, unbeknownst to these prisoners in the cave, above and behind them is an opening. And in that opening, above and behind them, is a fire. So it's casting light onto the wall you're looking at. Now, we don't see the individual, but there's an individual back there by the fire. And he's putting in front of the fire little figurines of an elephant, of a giraffe, and of a camel. Now, as he puts little figurines in front of the fire that you can't see, they're casting the shadows on the wall that you are seeing. Y'all with me so far? So what you're seeing coming by as you're looking at the wall is an elephant, a giraffe, and a camel. Now, you're all prisoners there. You can talk. And you're looking at all the same shadows. And you've come to learn that that first one was an elephant. It's called elephant. And that next one was a giraffe, and it's called giraffe. And then the camel. And you all come to the consensus. So you're down there, and there comes the giraffe, there comes the elephant, there goes the camel, all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm going to release you from the cave, just one of you. I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to let you go up to the top, up into the outer world, into the sunlight. Now, when you transition, when you move from the darkness of the cave into the upper world of sunlight, can you see well?
Probably not.
No, your eyes are kind of blinded. Yeah. And by the way, it hurts. The light coming into your eyes hurts. And so you come out of the cave and you appear to the others who are living on the earth to be stumbling and bumbling and blind, and your eyes hurt because there's pain in seeing. Right? And people say, hey, who are you? And you say, oh, you know, I'm this guy. And you say, I have knowledge. Right? And the guy tests you, says, really, you have knowledge? Okay. So he points to an elephant and he says to you, what's that? And you look, I don't know. And the guy says, you don't have any knowledge. That's an elephant. And the guy from the cave says, that's not an elephant. I know an elephant. I've seen an elephant. An elephant doesn't look like that. Oh, really? So the guy from the upper world again says, well, what's this thing? And he's pointing to a camel. And the guy says, no, I don't know. And he says, well, that's a camel. And the guy from the cave says, that's not a camel. I've seen a camel. That's not a camel. Ultimately, after some time, his eyes adjust, the pain goes away, and he comes to the realization that everything that he saw in the cave was not the thing itself, that they were the shadows of things, that all his life he believed these shadows were the things themselves. But now he's come up into the world of light, of enlightenment, and now someone has told him, oh no, these are the real things. So this man's now excited. The scales have fallen from his eyes. He's going to now run down to his former place, to the prisoners in that darkness, unenlightened. And he's going to run down with a new knowledge. And he gets down there. And when he moves from the sunlight into the darkness of the cave, can he see very well?
No.
He appears to the others to be stumbling and bumbling, and his eyes can't adjust. Are they going to believe a guy like that who's coming down with new knowledge? No. He's come down and he says, no, 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 guys, the stuff you're seeing, these are not the real things. They're the shadows of things. And at first the people won't believe because he doesn't seem to have knowledge. And how can he share the knowledge of the upper world to the individuals who are certain with their other things? So the point of the allegory is this. Whether you're moving from ignorance and darkness into the light, you're going to appear to be stumbling and bumbling. And receiving new knowledge is going to be painful, pain of the eyes. And once you get that knowledge, you want to go back down to your friends, to the people you know, and you want to share it. And you're going to appear to them to be stumbling and bumbling, and they may not listen. And they may desire to remain within the cave of darkness and believe that the reality is only the illusion, only the shadows on the walls. But here's the bigger question. How do we know that we are not in the cave ourselves? That what we see is our reality, your everyday life, are not just the shadows of things, an illusion, the way we see, rather than the real thing. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So this allegory of a cave is really an allegory about, or a kind of a metaphor for knowledge, ignorance, striving to see the light, to see the truth, trying to share that truth. By the way, when I think of the great sharers of truth, whatever truth may be, I think of Socrates, I think of Galileo, I think of Gandhi, I think of Martin Luther King Jr., I think of Malcolm X, I think of Jesus. What happened to those people? What happened to those people?
They were
Y'all
all
got killed.
murdered.
Killed.
They were all killed.
Because they had emerged from the cave of darkness, woke, if you will. Emerged, wanted to bring that light back down to the people. And what did they do? They killed them. It's not easy to take on the task of sharing knowledge. And remember, it's always a process. Not anyone totally knows. But to try and disillusion people from their certainties, to try and tell people you're watching shadows on the wall rather than the reality of things, is a dangerous thing.
It is.
We're seeing it now. We're seeing it now. If what we say that woke society means coming out of the cave of darkness, seeing the things themselves rather than the shadows of things, then we have to not only look inward and say, what biases do I have that I am unaware of? What sense of a reality? America's all great. There's no injustice. There's no this. But somebody coming to you and saying, you know, we've got to change this system because here's the truth. Many people in the cave would rather see the shadows on the walls, would rather believe the mythologies that they're comfortable with than this notion of the pain that comes with new knowledge. So I'm going to continue a little bit now. You have to read, you know, the allegory of the cave, and you write an essay about illusion, reality, these kinds of things. It's basically it. It should be open for you to be able to kind of start to look at it. If you have questions about that, please let me know. But the other thing to deal with in terms of truth and Plato is this one. I'll ask it this way. One can say there are 3 beds. 3 beds. I don't know if you can see my fingers. 3 beds.
Yeah.
Okay. There's the bed that the carpenter makes, you know, the one that you lie in to sleep. There's the painting of the bed, and there's the idea of bed in the mind. Okay? Which is the truest bed? Is it?
Yeah.
Deathbed.
Okay, I'm here. I love it. Which one? I know you all want to get back to bed. Is that what you said?
I said your deathbed.
The deathbed?
The deathbed. Your deathbed. Yeah.
Well, I'm
Oh,
getting really morbid there, Katie. Is it the bed in the mind, the bed that you sleep in, or the painting of the bed? Which is the true bed?
The bed you sleep in.
yeah.
Okay. Plato would suggest that the truest bed is the one in the idea of bed.
Yeah.
Every bed, because when you think of bed, there are all kinds, aren't there? But the idea of bed is the true bed. The one that the carpenter makes is one manifestation of the idea, one variation of the idea. The one that the painter paints is based off of either the idea in his mind or the one by the carpenter. He sees that one. So in other words, all the physical reality, all the beds are removed from the truth by one separation. At some point he will say art, for example, the painting of the bed is 3 times removed from the truth. The truth is the idea of bed. You follow what I'm saying on this one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So when you start to understand that, everything you're seeing is simply a manifestation of the one true bed, of the one true whatever it is, even the philosophical concepts like love or peace. When we say, where is love? Can you put it on a microscope? You're seeing, I don't want to confuse you because he called these ideas forms, but it helps me to say, you're seeing a form of the truth, a variation, but not the truth itself. The physical bed is the shadow on the wall. The real bed is the one of the mind. Okay, we're all good with that?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to what I think one of you, it may have been Jocelyn, who said,
Yeah.
it's kind of relative to the truth, right?
Mhm.
To the individual perceives it.
Yeah.
So let's look at this idea of a just society. Because the one book that we're really focusing on by Plato is not the Meno or the Phaedra or anything like that, it's the Republic. And it's called the Republic because in this book, Plato's trying to figure out what would be the ideal republic state, the ideal just republic. We all talk these days, especially more than ever, about fixing our society, fixing our republic, getting rid of the systemic violence, the systemic racism. We want to fix it. We want to bring justice to this society, right? So Plato, through Socrates through Plato, writes the Republic, a dialogue about what would be the ideal republic, one that has justice throughout. And Plato is going to suggest, or Socrates is, that, let's see, in order to find a just society, a perfect society, a perfect republic, which is made up of individuals, then if the society is made up of individuals, to find the just society, we should look at what it's made up of. We should look at the individual. If we can find justice in an individual, then if we had a society made up of these just individuals, we would have a just society. You understand what I just said? To find a just society, let's go down to the individual and find justice in the individual. Okay, all part of that humanism, right? Everything is the measure of, man is the measure of all things. The human being is the measure of all things. You want to find justice in a society, find justice in a human being. All right, so let's move into the human being. Let's move into the individual. And if we can find justice in an individual, then we can, a society made up of these just individuals would be a just society. All right, I hope I didn't go too quickly and too confusing. So what would be justice in an individual? Plato suggests, I'm going to switch screen again. Okay. Ideals and forms, the idea of bad, the manifestations of them. Plato suggests that an individual has a tripartite soul. Three-part, and that 3 is a magic number. 3 parts, don't think of soul in a kind of a Christian or religious sense. 3 parts that make up the psychic qualities of an individual. And what are they? Reason, the reasoning ability. Spirit, the courage, the emotional ability. Appetite, the physical needs of food, bed, love, these things, appetite, violence too. These 3 components make up the individual. Reason, spirit, and appetite. Now, of these 3, which should govern the other 2? Should your appetite be the one governing, meaning tempering, restricting, moderating the other 2? Should your spirit be in charge, or should your reason be in charge?
Spirit, reasoning.
I'm sorry?
I don't know.
Well, you got a 1 in 3 chance. You got a 1 in 3 chance. Let's say it this way. Let's say my appetite were in control of the other 2. Oh my God. I want to eat. I want to, all of the physical desires outweigh everything. So I've got an appetite. Should I eat 5 gallons of ice cream at one sitting because it feels good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that would not be good. What is telling you that would not be good? Your reason. If you give license to the appetite, you'll be eating, defecating, sleeping, engaging in sexual congress all the time. And sometimes reason says, you know what, maybe I should moderate. Maybe not, I know. What about spirit? Like, I'm pretty hot-tempered, not for any reason, it's just my way. And sometimes my spirit, gets in the way. The last time I got into a fight was when I was 25 years old, a street fight. I got worked. I had no business being in that situation. No business shooting my mouth off. I got handed to me. So anyway, but I had this spirit. I want to go out there. Is it smart to go out there? Hey, I got all this spirit. I'm going to confront 15 people. Is it smart? Is it brave? If my spirit says, I'm going to stand in front of this Mack truck that's coming in front of me? No. What's telling me that's not smart? My
Reason.
Or common sense.
Well, common sense, you're right. I don't know if it's a misnomer. How many people believe in common sense anymore? I don't know. I don't know what common sense is. Yes, but that common sense is reason. So nobody's saying here, you have appetites, deny them. Nobody's saying, become anorexic. No one's saying you shouldn't have any spirit. What Plato's suggesting is justice is when the reasoning principle tempers, governs, guides your spirit and your appetites. Reason becomes that moderator. All things in moderation. Allow for spirit, allow for appetite, but they should not govern who you are. Your reasoning ability should govern it. This is going to lead to various philosophies afterwards. Epicurean philosophy, which suggests that the goal of life and the purpose of life is to be happy. Satisfy the bodily needs. There's nothing wrong with sensual pleasures. But as I've just suggested, overdoing sensual pleasures causes pain, not pleasure. So in Epicurean philosophy, yeah, indulge the pleasures. Life is to be having fun. It shouldn't be all work. But one should have a reasoning principle that moderates that to some degree so that it remains pleasurable. Others might be the Stoic. The purpose is something else, that you restrain emotions. You don't let yourself get a little too, out of your mind. If reason is governing your spirit, if reason is governing your appetites, then you are functioning, that's the big thing, justly. Justice is when all aspects of your being, or by larger, of a society, are functioning through moderation. When are you a just person? If you're seeking, they killed George Floyd. Justice needs to be served. If justice to you means I'm going to grab that police officer and blow his brains out, that's vengeance. That's your spirit, and maybe even carnal, violent appetite, getting in the way of your reason. If you're saying this guy needs to be put on trial for murder so you can seek some kind of justice, that's reason governing.
What if you see it as punishment?
I'm sorry?
What if you see it as a punishment rather than vengeance? Can it be considered a punishment?
Yes. Absolutely. The penalty. See, this is where semantics get involved. When we talk about execution, they talk about, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Katie.
I said, I don't see how blowing someone's brains out is punishment, because I had a brother-in-law that did that to himself. So I don't agree.
That's terrible. No, I'm not exactly sure if he's referencing the act as much as somebody getting killed because they've killed or executed, whether that's justice. That's very debatable, very controversial. I'm not here to tell you one way or another. But the sculpture of justice, the one in front of the Supreme Court, has a blindfold on, has scales in one hand, and has the sword. Justice in that allegory is you balance the crime with the punishment. The sword is to enact the punishment. If the punishment outweighs, if you will, the crime, then it wouldn't be justice. And why is she blindfolded? Because justice has to be blind. If somebody harmed my family, I don't think my reason would be governing my spirit or my appetite for vengeance. I don't think that I can enact justice when it's so personal, when my emotions are touched. So to be blind means you have to be objective. This is why we have a jury trial of people who don't know the person. They're supposed to be blind to all of that. Whether they are or not is a different story, right? To allow the reason to govern their spirit. We want justice, or their appetites. Sometimes it's bloodlust in order to produce justice. And if an individual, if in yourself, you can walk around allowing your reason to govern your spirit and your appetite, allowing spirit to encourage and bravery and the esprit de corps and whatever it is to exist, but within reason. And your appetites. Yeah, I want to do this and I want to eat that. I want to do that. But within reason, then you are conducting yourself justly. All parts are functioning according to moderation. And if we did that in a society, if we had a society made up of those individuals, the society in itself would be a just society. Now, coming with this is another notion and another side of Plato. Plato is a very conservative moralist. And Plato actually believed in this notion of eugenics. Today, eugenics means, manipulating genes and genetic material and all that. but he didn't believe in a real democratic society whatsoever. He did believe in this notion that whomever's ruling, just like we have here, reason overcomes spirit and tempers appetite, that the ruler of a society should be, for the most part, this guy, reason. And it should be an individual who is a philosopher king, a ruler who's also a philosopher, who knows things, who understands wisdom. In our country, for example, what are the requirements to be president of the United States? Do you have to go to college?
No.
No.
No. There's only 2 requirements. You've got to be 35 years old,
And be
and
born
you've
in
got to have been born here.
Yep.
We can have as a president somebody who has absolutely no knowledge. As long as he's 35 and was born here, he can be president of the United States. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. Plato is suggesting that if we want a ruler, he better be able to rule justly, with reason, but allow also. And then he came up with this notion, what he called a noble lie. It's not true, but it's for the benefit of a society if we believe it. Noble lie. He likened individuals to kinds of metals: gold, silver, bronze, iron. Individuals are born with these kind of qualities, these metals. Some people are born gold. Gold people should be philosopher kings. Our society should take those gold people, educate them, preparing them for their life goal, which is to rule by virtue of their gold quality, their reasoning ability. There are other people who are silver. And these guys, they're not the big leaders, they're great legislators. They can write things down, they can keep the records, they can talk about laws, all that. And so the silver people will be in this position in our society. Remember, that society is going to be like a pyramid, philosopher king. The silver people. There are some people who are like bronze, and they are like strong warrior types. These guys, by virtue of their metal, bronze, should be warriors, defenders of our city, the guardians of the city. And there are some people who are iron, dull, pliable, malleable metal. And these people are the common people that should be served. And in order to form a just society, gold should rule, silver, then the defenders of the city, the bronze, and then the common people. And there should be no upward mobility. If you want a society to run justly, you can't have these iron people wanting to be gold. You can't have this person moving out of their station, moving out of where, in a sense, they're most efficient. To have that upward or downward mobility in a society creates chaos. Gold people should be rulers. Silver people should be legislators. Bronze people should be defenders and warriors in the military. And the lead people should just kind of deal with the everyday humdrum idea of life. Some lead guy wants to be gold. Oh my God, the whole society will crumble. What do you think about something like that?
I mean, it makes
It
sense.
almost
Well, it doesn't,
sounds-
I wouldn't say it makes sense. It sounds like something that's.
Well, Philip,
Then
what if
again-
we're deemed to be lead, and here you are learning at a college in order to be gold? We should deny you. We're going to put you in you're good at digging ditches, so go to the ditch digging school. Now, let me ask you something. Are we so far away from this? I think that it's anathema. It kind of works against our sensibilities because we've been brought up in this idea of upward mobility, log cabin to the White House kind of thing, self-made man or rugged individualism. The idea of somebody telling us, hey, you're born into this status, this is what your capabilities are, this is what you're going to be doing, kind of works against most of us, right? And yet I think we do a little bit of this a lot. I mean, I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot of this. Don't we, in a sense, rate people? I don't know if you can remember high school, but didn't you, like in the 10th grade, take an aptitude test? And they told you, oh yeah, you're going to be good. You have these qualities to become this. You
I
have
remember that.
qualities to become that, right? And then they give you another test, an SAT. And right now they're giving you a credit rating, aren't they? How many of you guys got credit ratings that kind of give you a sense of your worth and where you can go? There are a lot of these structures even in our democracy that are in place. And whether we agree with Plato or not, you know, it could work. Slavery works. Is it right? So, in the assignment that deals with, I'm going to stop the share for a second. There's the assignment that deals with Plato's Just Society, which is an essay you write after reading those sections, and you've just heard a little bit about it. Your views on this. This is part of your midterm. There's a multiple choice, and then there's the essay. But there's also there's the Just Society, which is your first assignment. What makes a just society, what we just discussed. The other one that's part of the midterm exam is the allegory of the cave, talking about perception, illusion, reality, knowledge, and I want to hear your views. Now, as always, I don't want a bunch of stuff, biography, stuff that you can cut and paste. Struggle with some of these ideas, share your views. You're all individuals. You're all unique individuals. There's no one else on earth like you. I want to hear what these individuals have to say. All right? We're about out of time. Who has any questions about this? How do we even know that we've actually had this meeting?
We don't.
Well, I'm recording it, so I'm going to believe even a recording is an illusion. Guys, it's Tuesday, so I want to have a happy weekend. Hey, Lakers! Woohoo! Better be Lakers, man. It's all right. Guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
You're welcome.